Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm going to be discussing the Sun's transit through the sign of Gemini, which starts on the 21st of May and finishes on the 21st of June when the Sun enters Cancer, marking the summer solstice in the north and winter solstice in the south. Now, before I go through the actual explanation of what the Sun's transit through Gemini means, along with some of the key aspects that will take place during that time, just want to clarify, as I always do, that astrology doesn't control our lives in any way, shape or form. We all have free will, we all get to choose how we respond to something, although we're not free from the consequences of the choice that we make. But with the astrology, it doesn't control us in any way, shape or form. It's more like a map of the kind of energetic influences around us. If we understand what these energies are doing, then we can use the energy more wisely and make sure that our actions are going with the natural flow of the energies rather than trying to fight against it. And therefore, we're more likely to take more conscious actions and less likely to get stressed out by whatever the energies around us are doing, because that's how we may respond to things if we don't choose to be conscious of what's going on around us. Now, with the Sun's passage through Gemini, this marks a month-long theme that we're all learning together. So it's the collective theme that everyone is now having to go through and learn. So in Gemini, it's about perception, it's about the way we communicate one another, and it's about expanding the mind, or expanding our perceptions so that we see things as they are rather than how we want them to be. So with Gemini, it's all about all that information coming in through the senses. So it's the pure raw data, as it were. So it's the information as it is if we first take it on board, before we put it through any kind of filtering, any kind of putting it against our belief systems, as it were. So the thing to remember is that we have the world around us, so the objective external world, and then all the information that comes into our senses, our minds then use to construct a model of that reality in our own minds. And it's this second reality, if you like, that we reside in, that we experience the world through. And for us to obtain or reach the highest point of Gemini, we need to get to a position where the mental model, or our mental understanding of the world around us, is aligned with the reality as it is. So part of the Sun's passage through Gemini will revolve around us looking at our perceptual biases and looking at our personal beliefs that distort our understanding of the truth, or distort the information coming through, because they're being passed through certain perceptual filters. So if for whatever reason we're being conditioned to be suspicious of things, then we may view information in a very suspicious or wary kind of way. If we're very optimistic about new beginnings, for example, though, then we may have an almost Pollyanna view of things. So we're too optimistic, we don't look at the reality of a situation. So we're all wired differently, so we all have different ways of experiencing this, but ultimately, for us to see the world clearly, we have to learn to accept it for as it is. So part of Gemini is letting go of whatever beliefs we have, or whatever resistance we have to the truth, and allow new information to come in. Doesn't mean that we accept information straight away. It doesn't mean that we just allow any information in. But it's important that we remain sufficiently open-minded, that we're prepared to listen to some new information, to take on board new ways of seeing things. Because the thing is, we all see things in different ways, and we'll see certain things with crystal clear clarity, and we'll see other things through perceptual biases. But because we're all wired differently, we'll all see different areas with clarity, and other areas where our way of seeing things is a bit distorted. And this is where the communication side of Gemini comes in. So whenever we're taking on board information through our senses, we then come to a perspective on it, and then we speak that perspective, or we tell that perspective to other people, and through listening they then incorporate that information. But obviously this is a two-way path. We also need to be listening to what other people say, and see where they may actually have a more objective understanding of what's going around us, and therefore take on their point of view into account, may actually give us a more empowered way of seeing things. So with the communication side of Gemini, the main thing we need to remember is that we need to always try and speak the truth as best we know it, but always be open to new truths, be open to new perspectives that give greater clarity or a better perspective of the situation we're already in. So it's this all about conscious conversation with one another. So we don't just say things willy-nilly, we don't just say things without thinking, as it were. It's understanding what is our own perspective and then sharing it with other people, sharing our understanding of the truth as best we know it, but not being attached to our own perspective, because we may well see things in a distorted way that we don't realise yet. And if someone else presents their truth to us and that truth is actually close to the objective truth, because every truth has two sides. If we really value the truth, then we need to listen to opposing perspectives and find where is the middle ground between the two. How can we take our thesis, the other person's antithesis, and synthesize them so that we achieve that middle ground, that truth that's more a balance between the two, so it brings both sides together and unifies them. And it's also about making those connections, understanding how seemingly random facts usually have some kind of connection with one another, but not being obsessed with believing that we have the only interpretation. You take any set of information and there will be different ways to interpret it, and therefore we shouldn't be clinging too closely to any one way of seeing things over another, because we may only be seeing half of the truth, and we need to hear the opposing truth in order to really understand what's going on around us. Now, in terms of the aspects to the Sun, there's a lot of them this month, so I won't go through all of them, but because a lot of the planets are clustered in Capricorn, and we also have Jupiter in Scorpio at the moment, a lot of the aspects of the Sun will be making with the other planets will be an inconjunct. So this is an aspect, it's 150 degrees, but usually it feels like we're trying to mix oil and water. It's two signs that are completely different to one another. They've got no common ground at all, and yet we've got to try and get these two energies to work together. So for that to happen, we need to come at things from a more spiritual perspective, or try and look at things from above. So look at both sides and try and understand how things are interrelated, or how can we undergo some kind of alchemy between these two areas and bring them together so they're both transformed and brought into a higher way of being. Because otherwise, the other way that we as human beings often try to resolve this is we just compartmentalise different parts of life. So two areas seem to be conflicting, we try and resolve it by compartmentalising it, but this only works to a certain extent. Eventually we'll come to a point where we need to try and resolve this conflict, resolve this tension, and figure out what at the core level of the two signs brings them together. Because things, we all consist of all 12 signs, we all have all 12 energies within our psyches that we're ruling different parts, and if take one of them away, we wouldn't function, wouldn't have the full potential to accomplish anything. So with these inconjuncts, it's important that we slow down, rather than trying to compartmentalise everything or treat things as separate when actually they're not. It's how can we make the two work together, or how can we go through a transformation of them in order for both aspects to be elevated to a higher level of functioning. Now we also have obviously the full moon first, that's going to be on the 29th of May, so this will be the moon in Sagittarius and Sun in Gemini, and be about balancing the micro details which Gemini specialises in and the macro, and understanding how the microcosm and the macrocosm work together. But it's also understanding where does our worldview limit our perceptions? Where do we have too narrow a worldview because we've never really been exposed to concepts or ways of being that differ from our own? So the full moon will essentially be challenging us to look at our beliefs and understand where our own social conditioning and our reluctance to investigate or to inquire about or be curious about other ways of seeing things or other belief systems. It's about the need to open the mind completely. So this doesn't mean that we lose discernment. We need that discerning mind as well. But if we don't open our minds, if we don't become willing to embrace unconventional points of view that challenge our current understanding of things, but also empower us to release limitations within our perceptions, then we're never really going to grow, we're never going to progress. It's only by opening the mind and removing limiting beliefs and embracing more empowering ones that we can empower ourselves. Then we have the new moon in Gemini on the 13th of June. This will be an opportunity for us to develop or set new intentions or new beginnings in areas ruled by Gemini. So it could be that we decide that we want to become or make an effort to always speak the truth in our conversations rather than shading the truth in any way. Or we may decide we want to become a bit more tactful in the way we communicate with one another. We may decide that at the moment we don't have a wide enough way of perceiving things, and we're always limiting our options or limiting our opportunities because we don't think outside the box. We don't look at the wider picture or look at different ways of viewing the same situation. Because by expanding our perceptions and looking at things from different angles, we get a more complete picture of the situation, and we can take a wiser course of action to resolve a situation if there's a problem. So the new moon in Gemini gives an opportunity to set new intentions in these areas. Obviously I'll do a separate video on this new and full moons because they need their own kind of videos, because they're their own unique events in their own way, and each one has its own nuances that we can't really go into just do much justice on this video when I'm trying to do a monthly forecast. Now we also have, during the Sun's passage of Gemini, right at the start we have a trine between Mars and the Sun. So this trine has the potential to allow us to align our actions with our sense of identity and do it much more smoothly. So it's about bringing our actions and desires into alignment with who we are and into alignment with the high goals that we set for ourselves, or making sure that our actions and desires are sublimated so they're guided by higher wisdom rather than egoic desire. So they're aligned with the true self rather than the false self, which is the ego. And therefore, whatever actions and desires we take are guided by wisdom rather than impulsive desires. And we also have a square to Neptune later in June itself, around about the 12th, so around about the 7th, sorry, and it's square to Neptune. This highlights the kind of challenge we often have of living in kind of the objective reality, or living in a rational world or a logical world, and yet at the same time we have spirit, which operates in a fundamentally different way. Neptune is in Pisces, which is his home sign, so the spiritual energy is very powerful during this transit, and it's about reconciling the two. So it's about understanding that yes, we are rational beings to a certain extent, but we're also spiritual beings. We need to bring the two together, and it also gives us the opportunity to make sure that we still incorporate compassion and sensitivity into how we communicate with one another. We still make sure that we trust our intuition. We're not just undermining our own guidance systems, our own intuition, through constantly trying to rationalise things or trying to explain things, or to second guess ourselves using faulty logic. So it's important that we make sure that the intuition and the logic are working together, and make sure that at the same time we avoid allowing illusions to cloud our judgment. We don't become deluded, we don't try and use engage in fancy or engage in illusions, and make sure we don't become deceptive with our words. Because the thing is, if we act in deception to try and get what we want, we may get it, but are we prepared to pay the price later on? Whereas if we make sure that we're always speaking the truth as best we know it, but we'll have that truth open to change, and if we make sure that we bring psychic sensitivity, compassion, empathy into the way we communicate, then it becomes easier to share our truth with other people, and other people may be more receptive to receiving our own personal truth, because we're not doing it from a cold and callous kind of way. We're making sure that the way we're communicating is open, honest, and willing to accept where we may be incorrect, or to make sure that we're taking on board other people's feelings when we're saying things, so we don't just come across as harsh and bullying or cold. So there's a lot to take on board, but I hope it's a useful guide for the month of, or the astrological month of Gemini. And the main thing to remember is it's all about how we perceive things, and being prepared to embrace new ways of seeing things, new points of view, and especially points of view which may challenge or cause that cognitive dissonance. But if we can avoid resisting that cognitive dissonance, and for a moment be prepared to accept that what the other person said that's caused this discomfort may actually be true, how then can we resolve this cognitive dissonance? Not by rejecting what the other person is saying, but modifying the cherished belief that we've held on to, or getting rid of it entirely if it's a disempowering one that stops us from becoming the best versions of ourselves. So the astrological month of Gemini is going to be a key period of a lot of alchemy due to the inconjuncts to the planets in Capricorn, but also to Jupiter. There's also an opportunity for us to really work on opening our minds, to open our perceptions and to see the world more clearly as it is, rather than how we may wish it to be. So if we can be open-minded enough to embrace new information or new ways of seeing what's already in front of us, and re-evaluating or reanalyzing the information that we have through this new, more honest lens, then we allow ourselves to align with truth and go with the flow of things. But a key part of it all is about learning to accept things for how they are, rather than resisting it mentally and trying to reframe it in a distorted way that allows us to carry on wallowing in illusions. If we can have the courage to open our minds to new ways of seeing things, and then get rid of any perceptual biases, we see the world as it is, and then that empowers us to take more conscious choices, because we're seeing the truth for how it is rather than how we want things to be. And by sharing our own truths, we may well help other people to do the same. But as long as we don't go around with an attitude of I'm right, you're wrong, or trying to convert people to our way of thinking, it's about being skeptical of the information coming to us, but being prepared to listen, because it may well be an important truth that we haven't considered and that we need to heed at this point if we want to really see things as they are and make wise choices down the line based on this new information. So may the Sun's transit through Gemini bring you much illumination, a more expanded perception, and a greater degree of mental freedom through releasing limiting beliefs and limiting perceptions. And may it be a month where we align ourselves more closely with the truth of things, rather than going with the convenience of a comfortable way of viewing things. And may this empower us all to shine our light greater by being honest with ourselves, honest with one another, so we're not creating karma for ourselves through deceit. May the astrological month of Gemini bring you many blessings. Take care.